Pubcast. I'm your host, Ken Ekman, and I'm joined by Bill Leon today. And we may be going it solo. We may not have anyone else join us this week, mostly because Bill Arsenault has talked his way through Batman vs. Superman once last week, and then once in additional...
Can I just say, if Bill Arsenault is listening to this, I'm sorry. I feel like this movie kind of broke him a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I've seen so far, there are 3 videos I've seen of Bill Arsenault ranting about Batman vs. Superman. The 2 through us directly, and 1 in a Periscope form of video. Yeah, he's... And here's the thing. The movie didn't break me. The movie simply... It's like a confirmation bias. It confirmed everything that I had feared about the movie from the trailers. It was just like every point. We're just going to jump right in. By the way, we'll talk. We have other topics we'll get into for fun later. This is the main game.
Yeah, of course.
And first of all, spoiler alert. Because fuck this movie, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about it without regard for anybody's feelings.
Well, before spoiler alerts, let's kind of give me like a 2-minute review. Give me your 2-minute non-spoiler opinion of this movie.
I will give... You know what? Okay, all right. I don't think that there's a way you can spoil this movie because there's nothing to be spoiled in it. It is
there is to certain people. I don't want to just dismiss everybody right off the bat that may not want to hear spoilers at the very beginning.
All right. Here's my non-spoiler review of Batman vs. Superman. All right. So here's Batman vs. Superman. Sit on it. That's it.
Just sit on the potsy. All right, Henry Winkler.
This movie.
My review is that it's a mess, and it's a slightly entertaining, fascinating mess. This is the kind of bad movie that I wanted Fantastic Four to be. If Fantastic Four was this interesting, it would be a more interesting flop to talk about, but it's not. So.
I think Batman vs. Superman is infinitely interesting to talk about. What I don't think is that it was satisfying in any way. This is the kind of movie that you go into, you buy some popcorn and you think, you know what, maybe I can tune things out for a little while and just tune my brain out. At least there'll be some explosions, and certainly the movie does provide you with a good deal of those.
Mm-hmm.
But it goes so far into the brainless territory, and it does it while attempting to be intellectual.
Really quickly though. I don't remember who said it, but there was like articles coming out that was like DC is afraid that this movie's too smart for Marvel fans. And
that was just...
Are you kidding me? Like, the Marvel movies are so much more intellectual than this. Like...
And the Marvel movies are not spring chickens exactly. They certainly have issues. But
they know what the fuck story structure is.
Yeah, but at least the Marvel movies have some joy to them. There's creative writing, there's interplay, there's quips.
There's a ton of fun. Yeah, no, there's a ton of fun to be found in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Age of Ultron is a movie I found very problematic, and I rewatched it this week. At the behest of Hawk Ripchaw, who said that he assured me that Batman vs. Superman is a better film than Age of Ultron, and
it's not.
He is absolutely wrong in every conceivable way, and I'm going to call him out on it the next time I speak with him. There's no way you could consider Age of Ultron a inferior movie, and that's coming from someone, by the way. Age of Ultron did not do it for me very much. It was it was deeply flawed.
The first half was fun. The first half led you to believe that it was going somewhere. And then once you realize that it's going nowhere, you're like,
At least the second half of Age of Ultron, the whole creation of the Vision segment is pretty cool.
Yeah,
the sequence The sequence in the farmhouse at the middle of the film is great. Some of the basically everything in the second half of the movie that works involves James Spader. James Spader made that movie entertaining.
Hawkeye has his line where his line where like, this is silly, nothing makes sense. That was a fun moment.
Right. Well, what the line is something like, "I
got an arrow.
I have a bow and arrow, and this is whatever it is. I'm not gonna."
It's a good moment. But my point is, though, you brought up joylessness, and I want to say, like, even the dour side of the Marvel Universe, Daredevil, which takes place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as fucking grim and gritty as that series is, there's lighthearted moments. There's fun to be had.
It's great that you say dour, because that's a phrase I used like when I walked right out of the theater and texted to you guys my very first initial thoughts of the movie was that this was a dour movie. And I have seen since 8 or 9 different reviews, or seen or read 8 or 9 different reviews. All of them mention the word dour. And that's not exactly a word that's in common use. I think it's because dour is just such a powerful synonym for depressing and dark and gritty that, yeah, it's just...
The thing about this movie, though, is that it's not exactly that. If I
found it immensely depressing.
And it is, but there's like such dumb, silly stuff going on plot-wise that they kind of... It's out of place, really. Like, you have this tone doing one thing, and then you have the plot and story trying to do this goofy comic book shit.
Can I just come out and mention that today is one of my days off the week, and as part of my 365 movie commitment, where I'm trying to watch an average of a movie a day, today I decided to marathon 3 post-apocalyptic movies, because this is post-apocalypse week. And the movies I watched today were Tank Girl.
My God, you watched Tank Girl?
Which Tank Girl is depressing in its own way.
You watched Tank. We need to have a separate discussion about this at some point.
We'll save that for later. I watched When the Wind Blows, which is an animated feature from the mid-'80s. And then I also watched a movie called The Day After. All 3 of these movies deal with the aftermath of nuclear holocaust, one in a more humorous way, but the last 2 I mentioned are dour movies and depressing movies, and neither of them gave me a migraine headache. Batman vs. Superman was dour, and it gave me a migraine headache. That's a bonus. And at least those other movies had coherent editing, had a plot that made sense to a pretty good extent, had special effects that even for the 1980s on a made-for-TV movie like The Day After, hold up pretty well today. The acting was solid, the writing was solid in these movies. So if you're going to do dour, at least have the common courtesy to do it well. Don't do this.
Okay, I have... I don't know if it's a good example, but I feel like it's a good example. The Dark Backward is very dark and...
Backward?
Well, no, I was going to say depressing. It can feel very depressing, and it's gritty, but it's also fun and silly. So
I wouldn't say gritty. I would say The Dark Backward's a grimy movie.
Grimy, yeah, it's filthy. It is filthy.
But you're right.
It's possible to balance these things, and I don't think Zack Snyder has any interest in that, really, because when you think back to movies he's done before this, like when are there ever like joyful, gleeful, fun moments in his movies? Like,
well, here's the thing: the 300 got by in terms of. While I wouldn't say it has any moments in it that are joyful, it took joy in the kinds of action sequences it had, and the Spartans took joy in what they were doing in warfare. So there are these rah-rah patriotic kind of moments. So that made the movie entertaining to an extent. Not necessarily for repeat viewings, but for a first time viewing, it worked enough. And Watchmen even kind of has like a taking speaking of apocalyptic stories, Watchmen deals with that, and it deals with it in it. It's not, well, again, it's a movie that doesn't quite work, mostly because of some poor editing and direction. But what does work in it is it does take joy in sardonic satire, and it points out some really humorous. Basically, the entire plot of Watchmen is what would happen if ultra-conservatives took over the country in somewhere in the mid-1940s.
Mm-hmm.
How would that lead?
The Watchmen film is so much more of an entertaining film than Batman versus Superman is.
Yeah. Oh, I actually rewatched that also in the last week, just because I remembered not liking it that much, but finding it at least amusing, and I had the same feeling this time. The story doesn't work.
What would you give Watchmen on a beer rating?
4 probably. I would say if I had to throw out a beer, see, story, the plot doesn't make a lot of sense. The ultimate meaning at the end, is what the bad guys put together to try to unite East and West doesn't make a lot of sense. And in fact, if anything, the concept of Dr. Manhattan, who by the way was working for the Americans, turning against the Americans and the Soviets, if anything, would embitter the Soviets that much further by saying, you created this guy. And anyway. Yeah. Point being, it has enough in it to sustain a casual viewing. Like if I'm multitasking and not really caring much about what's on, there's some cool imagery in it. That opening sequence that plays to the times they are changing is way over long because they loop the song about 4 times. But interesting.
I like that, but also I don't want to discredit. I really like the Nat King Cole comedian fight scene where he's fighting off the assassin, who I think is Ozymandias.
Yeah, Ozymandias. Yes. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's supposed to be, but if you actually look and compare the body silhouettes, it's clearly someone who looks nothing like the actor who plays Ozymandias. Which, of course, I mean that's not unheard of as a film trick.
We would rather talk about Alan Moore adaptations than Batman versus Superman.
So, okay,
back on topic.
Here's the thing. This is our non-spoilery version of Batman versus Superman, talking about it in comparison to other things. Let's talk about Batman versus Superman, or v Superman. Yeah, Batman v Superman in comparison to itself, because there's really no movie you can compare this to. I mean, to an extent, you could say that this is an extension of the Man of Steel movie, but it really, I don't know. It kind of.
I have a movie you can compare it to.
All right.
The Pirates of the Caribbean sequels. Yep. It's like you have this idea for a story, but you also want to cram in all this other shit while you're doing it.
But even those movies had small character moments that
I like the sequels
of humor.
Pirates. Yeah, no, those are fun movies, I would say.
Everything involving Keith Richards in the third movie works really well. And that's just a short little moment, but it's a moment of humor. That's the thing. This movie, the only thing Batman v Superman has that approaches humor is the interplay between Alfred and Batman, which I would argue are some of the better moments in the film.
Jesse Eisenberg and Holly Hunter attempts to have humor, and what the fuck happens there, I don't know.
You know what? The only thing that satiates me in Jesse Eisenberg's acting choices here is the fact that it is so. Rumors had been abound for the last few months that his performance was based, at least in part, on the writer Max Landis and his eccentric videos describing how he would do a Batman story.
Superman.
Well, right, Superman, right.
Yeah.
It's the same whatever.
They're not the same thing. That's the whole point this movie tries to make, is that they're not the same thing.
Okay.
However, yes, no, I see the Max Landis influence.
And I think it's so obvious that that's exactly what he was going for.
Yeah, and I that's kind of why I enjoyed it. Jesse Eisenberg was one of my favorite parts of this movie, and it wasn't because of his committed acting performance.
To me, the performance almost seemed like, I'm not going to say I hated what he did in the movie. I think is silly, but it was silly in a way that is similar to like Michael Sheen in the Twilight movie, where it's just, I don't care. I'm just going to have fun with this role for, hell or high water. I'm going to do something interesting regardless of whether the script demands it of me. That's what he was doing. He wasn't doing Lex Luthor. That's for damn sure.
All right.
So with that being said, I think that, okay, I won't condemn Jesse Eisenberg just because he was clearly having fun with what he was doing.
I had fun watching him. He was one of my favorite, probably next to Ben Affleck, my favorite performance. What did you think? Let's just dive into Affleck, because I don't think you cared for Eisenberg all that much, right?
Well, as an actor, I think Jesse Eisenberg is a limited performer.
Well, let me ask you this. When you think of Luthor, do you think of Gene Hackman in the live-action films?
To be perfectly honest, my first enduring vision of Lex Luthor is not from the Batman films. It's from the Batman... I mean, not Batman. Jesus. I keep coming back to
okay, to be fair, Batman is more the star of Man of Steel 2 than Superman is.
Very true. Okay, so let me backtrack. My enduring image of Lex Luthor is from the Superman animated series from the 90s.
Voiced by Clancy Brown.
Yes. And what's interesting, and this is something that always kind of baffled me, looking back at it, it's not, and Clancy Brown, by the way, one of the best voice actors. And not just voice. Jesus, I love Clancy Brown in general.
Clancy Brown is my shit. What was he
Honestly,
in? He was in Batman versus Superman. No, he was in Daredevil. He was in Daredevil season 2. My bad.
Yes. No.
Ignore me. Yeah, I just confused Daredevil season 2 and Batman v Superman.
And here's the thing. One thing that I actually thought Lex Luthor was black for the longest time, because on the Superman series, I think he's basically drawn that way.
His skin is a little darker shade than
He's got a darker skin tone, the bald head kind of thing, and it's I don't know. That's an assumption I always had about it, and then I rewatched. It was one of those things when I saw the Superman Christopher Reeve movies when I was so young. I didn't even catch that the guy was supposed to be the same character that Gene Hackman was. And so I never had that as a conception of who Lex Luthor was. And then rewatching those years later, I figured out, oh, so that's supposed to be the same guy. And I was like, wait a second. And then I looked up, and Clancy Brown, he's clearly not a black dude. So I figured, oh, okay, so maybe that's just my own brain thinking. I don't know. One thing. It doesn't matter. The point being, I loved the animated series depiction of Lex Luthor.
The thing about the animated series is that back in the 90s, starting with Batman the Animated Series, DC had a shared television universe in the DC Animated Universe. Because that Superman series tied in, and then about 8 to 10 years later, they made the Justice League show, and that was all canon. It was all by Bruce Timm and Paul Dini and like a lot of the same people.
And yeah, it was sort of an animated cinematic universe where they all had little ties into each other. Never a huge crossover moment, to my recollection, until they made
Justice League.
Right, Justice League stories. But it, ultimately, it was canon for it, within itself, and that was a fascinating show. And I actually think, honestly, Clancy Brown would make a hell of a Lex Luthor now, like the actor, not animated.
I can't imagine him bald, but I would love to see. If he could keep his hair, I'd be totally down. But
which, by the way, every film depiction of Lex Luthor has depicted him as having hair, with the exception of the Kevin Spacey one.
I was going to say, yeah, Kevin Spacey.
And even that one opens with him wearing a wig, by the way. So, and I will say, of all the of the live action depictions of Lex Luthor, Kevin Spacey kind of stole the show for me. Superman Returns is not a good movie, but Kevin Spacey is a good Lex Luthor.
Mm-hmm.
I maintain that he's one of the stronger ones. I mean, he carries the humor, he carries the anger. He's much more threatening than Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman was a bumbling dope.
We're clearly not interested in talking about Jesse Eisenberg's performance. And I want to talk about Ben Affleck. However, we're going to put Ben Affleck on the back burner. Tell me how you feel about Henry Cavill as an actor.
Henry Cavill is an actor, isn't he?
I guess. I don't know if he's a good one.
I'm actually pulling up his filmography to see if there's any moment in the film, in his film history, that I recognize as something. Okay, you know what? No, I was gonna say I liked the movie Stardust, which I actually just rewatched recently. But to be perfectly honest, he wasn't by any means like objectively a good actor in it. The movie was all very soap opera-ish, so it's easy to get by without much talent.
I never saw The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I heard he was okay in it.
That says so much, doesn't it? Henry Cavill had a small role in The Count of Monte Cristo. I liked that movie. You know what? I have not seen a film with Henry Cavill that I could objectively say was a good performance. And we certainly did not get that in Man of Steel. And guess what? We didn't get that again here.
I think people are being a little hard on him. I don't think he's awful, but he's not good. Like I'll give you an example, which is the scene where he confronts Batman in the Batmobile. He's like, next time they shine that signal in the sky, don't go to it. Consider this mercy. And I'm like, okay, bro.
It's not that his performance is necessarily bad, because I also haven't been convinced that he's bad. I think it's more the writing and the direction, because
the tone of the movie won't allow him to be personable.
He seems like he doesn't have a clue what he's doing in any given scene. Like, the motivation is so varied. At one moment, he's the savior of the universe. And
they do that fucking Jesus shit with him in Man of Steel.
Oh, well, I mean, which was also something they toyed with a little bit here too.
Yeah, but not to that extent. Not to the we're gonna spell it out extent, which is oh boy.
So yeah, that was that. There isn't much to say about Henry Cavill in this film other than he's there, and he's despite the movie technically being a sequel to Man of Steel, he's barely in the movie other than action scenes.
Let's talk about that, because I have a lot of problems with this being a sequel to Man of Steel.
Man of Steel was not a very good movie, and as far as the one thing it had going for it was the way it ended was intentionally made open to the promise of what are they going to do next. The problem being, if you do not do a good Superman movie to begin with, in order for you to expand your universe, you should probably try again and see if maybe next time it sticks.
Well, the thing with this movie is that of all the millions of dollars that this movie made, how many of those people do you think actually saw Man of Steel? And even then, even the people that did see it, that was 3 years ago.
Man of Steel was a pretty successful film, Bill. I mean, it wasn't hugely successful. It was seen as a minor disappointment, but it made a lot of money. Mostly internationally.
At some point, I watched Man of Steel, and there were so many moments in this movie where I was lost, because I was like, wait, what? The things that tie into Man of Steel, even the opening battle where it's Zod and Superman fighting, it took me a minute to realize what actually was going on. They don't make it entirely clear, and that's kind of a poor way to open up your fucking movie.
So, why don't we jump into the story of this movie?
Story, as in quotes.
So, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice opens up quite explicitly with Batman as Bruce Wayne mode, driving a Jeep. Which, by the way, do you think Bruce Wayne, billionaire, is going to be driving a Jeep?
Yeah,
I just throwing it out there. Probably not. But anyway, so billionaire Bruce Wayne is driving a Jeep through the streets of of Metropolis because he's apparently been called there or something in order to respond to the fact that his Gotham or not his Gotham was his Wayne Corp.
Wayne Corp.
Yeah, his Wayne Corp building is threatened by Zod's weapon of mass destruction that he was using in the beginning of at the end of Man of Steel, and it's sort of a flashback sequence that sort of resets the tone of that fight in the eyes of someone on the ground experiencing it from afar.
Now, I like that scene. I like that idea. The problem I have with it is that it's not something this movie sets up. It's something that you had to have seen Man of Steel to entirely get. It's a decent enough scene. Ben Affleck brings his chops. Like, I think he's the strongest actor in this movie. There's no buts about that.
Well, Jeremy Irons is a better actor overall than anyone, but you get to see Bruce Wayne. Yeah. Bruce Wayne is doing as much damage control as he can possibly do as a mortal being on the ground during this. And there are direct 9/11 corollaries in that you have the collapse of the Wayne Corp building and the huge upburst of dust blasting towards him as he runs into it, which is that's your first sign that this is not going to be a very happy-go-lucky depiction. This is not going to be the Super Friends. Mm-hmm. We are going to have some dark elements, which is not inherently.
How is Aquaman there without it being the Super Friends? He's ridiculous. Aquaman's a cartoon character.
Yeah, Aquaman is Khal Drogo from Game of Thrones.
They've been trying to make Aquaman serious for like 50 years and to no avail.
Well, I think part of the problem is that there was an entire... Well, Aquaman's been a joke for a long time, and then there was an entire story within... What was the name of that? What was that HBO series? Entourage. There was an entire
Aquaman movie,
the movie cycle in there that was all based around the fact that Aquaman is essentially a joke.
Aquaman sucks.
Now, I
didn't mean to bring up Aquaman. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, you can't get into that without mentioning, of course, the super best friends from South Park. He's, instead of Aquaman, he's Sea-Man.
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that made it funnier to some extent.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so
what were we talking about?
The storyline. Yeah, there's not much to remember in this film. So that opening sequence itself, I think it could have potentially laid the groundwork for if you wanted to do a darker Batman versus Superman story. That's a way to begin, by showing an example of why Batman does not like Superman, and he's angry at Superman because he watched as Superman quite stupidly allowed himself to become embroiled in combat in the middle of an open city full of thousands of people, instead of trying to lead Zod away. That's what he did in the other. That's what Superman would have done in any other depiction, is try to avoid civilian populations.
Which is, this movie, I guess the whole point of this is to address those criticisms concerning Man of Steel.
And it addresses them by having Superman effectively not give a crap that happened.
I need to get into a spoiler at this point, so I think we're going to just call spoilers at this point. There's two scenes later in the movie when Doomsday shows up. Superman punches him into outer space, which is what he should have done with Zod.
Should have.
Again, that's sort of like a response to criticisms of Man of Steel, is like, oh, well, he's going to punch Doomsday into space. The problem with that is that they both fall down, and Doomsday lands on a quote-unquote uninhabited island. And Batman's plan...
We know it's an uninhabited island because someone says explicitly, yeah, he landed on this uninhabited island.
So at this point, I'm thinking, oh, they're going to fight on this island. Whatever. Batman says out loud, I need to lure him back to the city, which at no point have we ever seen be evacuated or announced, like, you people need to get the fuck out of the city. He's just like, I need to bring him back to the city. And I'm like, isn't that why you became Batman at the beginning of this movie?
Can we just mention that for those unfamiliar with Batman as a character, first of all, really, you still exist? Second of all, one of his major ethos is that he does not kill. Mm-hmm. He brings people to justice, much like Daredevil in the more recent Daredevil series. He is a Avenger who not to say part of the Avengers, he's a masked Avenger, and he does he brings people to justice. He refuses to kill because killing would make him as bad as the people he's fighting. Mm-hmm. That's thrown out the window for this. Batman just straight up murders people in this movie.
Not at this point, but my argument here is that after witnessing that Zod fight and the massive chaos, his first thought with Doomsday on this uninhabited island is, let's get him back over to civilization.
Yeah, well, you know, this gigantic mongoloid creature who is unstoppable, and no matter how much energy you expend trying to destroy him, he only gets stronger. Let's bring him closer to where people live.
And I know people listening to this are going to respond, like anybody that's like pro this movie and doesn't see the problems, somebody's going to be like, oh, well, that's where the kryptonite was. There's a million fucking ways to not only deal with this, but also, like, from a script perspective, why is that where the kryptonite was? Why the fuck did Lois Lane, like, pick it up and drop it and then have to go get it? Like, what was all that? None of that shit makes sense.
I mean, I'm assuming she dropped it in the water to try to get it as far away from Superman as possible, which is at least...
That makes sense. Okay. I didn't think of that.
Actually, here's the thing. I think they missed out on a major opportunity to introduce a character because she dropped it in the water. Why didn't Aquaman suddenly surface holding the thing? Ma'am, I brought you your, yeah.
That would be amazing. Oh my God.
We may need this. Actually, here's a thought, Bill. Here's how you could actually make Aquaman kind of badass in this movie. Batman, Superman, and because Wonder Woman is in this movie,
we'll get to that.
For no explanation.
We'll get to that.
Being completely unable to resolve the situation, okay? Mm-hmm. Look, and then suddenly, when it looks like everything is dire and nothing else is, there's nothing they're going to be able to do, they're all going to die, Aquaman jumps out of the water, stabs him with the kryptonite spear, and then he smiles, gives a thumbs up, walks away, dives into the water, hard cut to credits.
Now that would be the most legitimate way to make Aquaman a badass, but they're not going to do that. That would never happen.
Because it would be too, first of all, yes, it's silly, but it's silly in a way that would be, at least it would relieve some of the tension in this.
It's too much like a comedy move, though.
Oh, not comedy. It's too much of a comic move.
That doesn't. But in DC Comics, that wouldn't happen.
Are you saying DC Comics haven't been known to be silly from time to time? Because if so, I have a bunch of examples.
What I meant in the modern world. You know, the post Ultimate Marvel world where everything is supposed to be like cool.
Let me ask you, Bill. Have you ever heard of superdickery.com?
No.
This website, it's been around for, I think, probably since the early 2000s. Superdickery.com is a website founded upon the premise that Superman is just a dick. Mm-hmm. And that premise is proved simply by the website is basically just a collection of Superman comic book covers throughout all of the different ages of DC Comics, in which Superman on the cover of these comic issues is performing something which is incredibly dickish. Mm-hmm. There's one my favorite one is one in which they establish on the cover of this comic that this is going to be a comic in which, for some reason, Superman has had to adopt Jimmy Olsen. And so Jimmy Olsen is now his father. And there's this thought there, you see Superman holding a sweater and burning it with his eyes. And there's a word bubble with Superman saying, now that I've adopted you as my son, Jimmy, I can say that this present you've gotten me for Father's Day is atrocious, and you must be punished. And he's just burning the present that Jimmy gave him. Because Superman's a
dick. Possibly some kind of sick fetish weirdo, too.
So what I'm saying is, there's plenty of goofy shit in the DC universe, and a lot of these comics come from the older ages of DC, but there are plenty from the new ones, too.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, so where the story progresses is basically it follows, it intercuts between the lives of Superman and Batman, if you can call them lives. Batman, on one hand, is doing investigative stuff. In fact, actually, if there's anything you can definitely say about this depiction of Batman that makes him superior to the Christian Bale Batman, it's that the Batman in Batman v Superman actually does do detective work.
Does he?
Yeah, there's lengthy scenes of him putting together, resolving some puzzles to the story. Now, I'm not saying that they're brilliantly depicted, but they're actually, it shows them happening. It's not just, hard cut to the next plot point. So that's something. It's not much. And there's a token scene in which Lois Lane and Lois Lane and Clark Kent are talking to each other early on, and they don't really address that going forward. The bathtub scene.
Why is that there? Why is that there?
To give teenagers a little something to masturbate to. I don't know.
I don't think that's it.
Very true. We live in an internet world where anyone who knows to Google can Google, but no,
right.
It's.
I don't get it.
It's Zack Snyder objectifying women, which is one of his favorite things to do. And Zack Snyder likes to objectify women by making them appear to be empowered.
Right. Yes.
That's pretty much the entire definition of Sucker Punch.
He's not directing Wonder Woman, right?
No, actually, they do have a female director behind Wonder Woman. So why don't we go ahead and jump into Wonder Woman in this film?
All right, let me just say this to a lot of people who keep saying that Gal Gadot gave a good performance in this movie.
Gal Gadot?
I think it's Gadot.
I think it's Gadot.
I think it's Gadot. I'm pretty sure she confirmed this on an episode of Jimmy Kimmel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She's not a good actress. This is not a good performance as Wonder Woman. This is Boba Fett. This is, she's mysterious, so it's good. No, she's not. Like, there's nothing there. There's nothing there at all. Like, it's unbelievable how little there is to her in this movie. Fucking Anne Hathaway as Catwoman had more to do in The Dark Knight Rises than Wonder Woman has to do in this movie. I'm
not going to shoot down her performance.
I don't think it was, and I'm not saying it's her fault. I'm just saying what she had to work with was garbage.
Well, absolutely. First of all, her character, literally, she does one thing in the lead up to the big fight at the end that indicates that she's involved at all, and that's stealing Bruce Wayne's hacker jiggy thing from a computer that when Bruce Wayne was trying to hack.
And he just straight up
stuff.
He just meets her, and because she knows some information about this sword, just starts giving her all this information. Like, oh, you're cool. Like, what? You're not going to be a little bit more on your toes about this?
There should be a lot more setup than there is. The fact is, they decided to do... This movie is This is an attempt to do a movie like The Avengers, but without the years of build-up to create The Avengers. Because with Avengers, you had Iron Man, you had Hulk, you had Thor, you had Captain America. 4 entire movies building up to the 5th, the Avengers film. And that was necessary because people didn't know much about these characters. And to be frank, who the hell knows anything about Wonder Woman unless you're a comic book fan?
Or even, I was going to say, or if you watch the 70s TV show, but even then, I don't know how faithful that is to her character or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, really, all I know is that she's like...
I know what her equipment is. She has the wristbands that are like impenetrable, and she has an invisible rope.
And an invisible jet plane.
Which we don't see in this movie.
No,
we might not see it all.
I would have loved to have seen it like in the Wonder Woman TV show where it's just like, you see her sitting in...
That would be hilarious. That would be amazing, honestly.
That would
have been a much needed moment of levity in this film.
Yeah, and Wonder Woman's only weakness is, and it's one of my favorite pieces of superhero lore. Wonder Woman's only weakness is a man tying her arms together.
It doesn't have to be a man.
No, it has to be a man that ties her.
It doesn't have to be a man, and it's the wrists. The bracelets have to be pushed together.
When did they change that? Because it used to be a man. Probably
whenever, they rebooted this shit for the Tumblr generation.
Because I recall it being her.
I'm sure at some point it was, but I guarantee you at this point it's not.
All right, I'm looking it up.
I promise you, in modern canon, I'm not saying, I'm sure that's what it was in the fucking 40s or whatever. Wonder Woman was actually created by like a psychologist, right?
Yeah. So,
one of the creators of Wonder Woman was not just like some comic book guy. Like there was some dude that actually wanted to make a positive role model for women involved.
Well, actually, the creator was into BDSM. That was actually.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because, like, with the man and the bracelets and all that shit. So.
Either way,
we're getting off on tangents here.
Well, I mean, this movie is nothing but tangents to begin with.
It is. It's appropriate. That's a good point.
So, okay. So basically what happens is in that opening sequence, Bruce Wayne sees one of his employees, Wallace Keefe of Wayne Enterprises, injured, and his legs become severed, and he's crippled permanently by a piece of debris that Superman and
Zod
basically caused to fall on him. And he becomes kind of your crazed veteran character who's all, I've been in the shit, and I blame, he's a conspiracy theorist. He blames, for some reason, he blames Bruce Wayne like an insane person.
No, he doesn't blame Bruce Wayne, does he?
What was with all those, like, envelopes with the red shit all over them?
Maybe.
Like,
never
this
mind.
is your fault?
I don't remember.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so... Oh, okay. I guess they do try to say that like Lex Luthor did that, but I don't know. That's not that they barely established that. The point being is Luthor lures him in by giving him a nice wheelchair and says, "We're going to put you before Congress, and you're going to be you're going to speak out against these masked superheroes."
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's a bomb in the chair, which apparently bomb-sniffing dogs aren't able to find, nor anyone. Like, if you go into Congress to testify, there's tons of security you have to go through. So I'm curious why no one... I mean, granted, he's super genius Lex Luthor, so maybe he found a way to hide it. Whatever. I'll forgive that.
This movie needed Batman running with a wheelchair over his head going, "Some days you can't get rid of a bomb."
Actually, what it should have been is Batman running with a copy of Batman vs. Superman in his hands, yelling, "Some days you can't get rid of a bomb."
This movie didn't bomb.
It would be meta.
Where in the money? Where in the money? That's my impression of DC Comics right now.
Well, they're certainly bringing it in because people will go see a superhero movie. Like, if Batman and Superman are on that label, people are like, yeah, I'll go see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth noting, though, as much money as this movie has made, They're saying that the movie needs to make approximately $1 billion to break even after all is said and done, with international marketing and such figured in.
Good Lord.
That's what they're saying. Now, the movie has made $500 million worldwide already, and that's good news for the producers, because that should put them on par to make that if the film holds up in subsequent weeks. Mm-hmm. And there isn't much competition in April. April new releases are, I mean, unless Hardcore Henry unseats it.
I doubt it, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. That being said, a few other things. I feel like I'm jumping around, but then so does this movie. We haven't even gotten into the dream sequences yet. Of which there are many. The first and most... the first dream sequence is Bruce Wayne as a child falling into the Bat Pit, which is, of course...
Why are we still putting this in movies? We've seen this a million times.
But this time they did it all dream sequency, because the bats make him rise up. They raise him into the air, and he's rising up through the pit. And it's supposed to be like, oh, that's, this profound moment. And really, it's just a scene that has no purpose within the film.
I'm getting to the end of my rope here. I've seen a lot of people praise the way they handle the Batman origins in this. Like, oh, they got it done and we move forward. I'm like, why was it there at all? Why was it there at all? We know this shit. We don't need this.
Also,
we know it.
Here's the thing. The Bruce Wayne origin story as it exists within Zack Snyder's world isn't that Bruce Wayne's father heroically saved his son's life while a mugger was trying to get them. It was Bruce Wayne's father attacked the mugger, instigating the mugger into shooting him and shooting his wife. Mm-hmm. Why he didn't shoot the kid at that point, I'm actually kind of surprised, but I mean, that's as may be.
It doesn't matter. Like, we've seen this shit. We've seen it. You don't even as fucking opening credits, cut it. It doesn't need to be there. Meld something out of your other parts of your mess to make opening credits with. You don't need to tell this story again. I'm fucking sick of seeing it. You know what the fuck Civil War's not going to do? Tell us fucking Spider-Man's origin story again. At least with visuals. They might say something or whatever, but I guarantee you that it's not going to show up as a little fucking visual cue. Like, because we fucking know it. We don't need it again. It's in at least 4 other fucking movies. You can get it elsewhere. And dumbass people out there will be like, oh, well, in this continuity, we needed to see it again. And Jeffrey Dean Morgan needed to play Bruce Wayne's father. And go fuck you. This is why you guys are invested in this fucking garbage-ass attempt at launching a fucking franchise.
At one point during this movie, I broke down laughing so hard, I thought I was going to just, like...
What was that?
That was at Dream Sequence number 2, which is Bruce Wayne's magical mystery tour into the Mad Max / Wizard of Oz future.
Batman Fury Road.
Yes, Batman Fury Road. And, by the way, when you think wearing that rubber costume in amongst all the sand in the desert, wouldn't that chafe after a while?
It'd be fucking sweaty and hot as hell.
So anyway, there's this dream sequence where Batman is fighting off the winged monkeys from Wizard of Oz, as well as Nazis dressed in Superman logos for no reason. This is ostensibly it's supposed to establish the insane fear building in Bruce Wayne that this alien that he's unfamiliar with. In fact, actually, you know what? Okay, here's what it does. It turns Batman from being a human being into a xenophobic asshole who believes that this alien is going to kill everyone, and he must destroy this alien.
In the span of about 2 minutes, it goes from ripping off Mad Max to Call of Duty / John Wick.
Yeah, all in.
At the drop of a fucking hat, he takes a gun from a dude and is just shooting everyone dead to the ground. Fucking, and I mean, it's a dream sequence. Blah blah blah. Why is this in this movie? You could cut this shit and not miss a beat. I think Jay from Red Letter Media said, like, I think that was in there just for the trailers. Mm-hmm. I can't think of another fucking reason for it to be there.
There's some things that directors leave in movies just because of their own ego. And that's an example of it. This is a director too in love with his own work that he needs to include a lot of extraneous scenes that he's a bad director because he's too afraid to instruct the editor to cut it out. And the editor, by the way, David Brenner, is not at all he's I cannot say, you know, he is equally responsible here, is my point. Mm-hmm. Because you, Mr. Brenner, as well as Zack Snyder, have created a true monster of a movie. First of all, not only are there too many dream sequences, but there's so many scenes in this movie that feel out of sync with each other. Nothing is established. It's all just, here's another scene. And this scene, what's fascinating about the movie is some of the scenes work, like individual moments, individual sequences work, but they do not create a bigger whole.
Let's talk about setup and payoff.
Okay.
And we were talking about this before we went on the air. The thing I really want to focus on is things that this movie unto itself sets up, not things that it's paying off from Man of Steel. So, for example, Bruce Wayne running around doing damage control in the beginning does not count. Because anybody that did not see Man of Steel, that's not a payoff for them. That's just how the movie begins. Mm-hmm. And there's tons of moments like this. We can boil it down to like movies or moments in this movie that it actually sets up itself. There's not many. There's 4 or 5. And I say that the fight is sort of one because it's the title, but that's a weak argument.
Yeah, it's as far as setup and payoff, this movie, first of all, the payoff of this movie, which is ostensibly supposed to be the Batman v Superman fight, is not particularly well done. It's just Batman and Superman throwing swings at each other, and Batman shoots Superman with, I guess it's supposed to be kryptonite dust, which, by the way,
some kind of gas. Yeah, he like turned it into a gas.
Here's a question: why is it that he had to go to the trouble of making this big spear? I'm hearing myself echo on your side, Bill.
I accidentally unplugged my headphones.
Okay. So the kryptonite spear thing is, using a huge chunk of kryptonite when he already made like kryptonite dust bullets. Why didn't he just? I mean, this is a Batman that had no problems killing people. So why didn't he? And he was determined to kill Superman. So why didn't he just make kryptonite bullets?
This is a PG-13 movie. That's the only answer I have to that question. Because
that doesn't stop him from shooting people, like in the car driving sequence where he's got his friggin' machine guns just fucking murdering people left and right.
When people examine the idea of Batman versus Superman and they boil it down to like who has what abilities, it's always like, how can Batman kill Superman? Superman's immortal and Batman's just a human person. And my response to that is always, well, Superman's dumb. Like, he's not very intelligent, and it's very easy to outsmart him.
I wouldn't say that Superman's necessarily dumb. I would say maybe ignorant, because Superman...
In this universe, in the Snyder universe, he's dumb.
Yes, okay. Well, true. And here's the thing, though. Superman, as a character, it makes sense that he wouldn't be the best fighter in the world, because he's so insanely strong that he's never had to learn how to actually fight. He punches someone once and they're down for the count. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, Batman spends his entire waking life, when he's not being Bruce Wayne, training to beat the shit out of people. And so once Bruce Wayne puts together a suit that's capable of holding up to the punches that Superman can dole out, it makes sense that he could beat the shit out of Superman because he knows how to use his tactics and his skills against him. Superman's just there to punch.
Which is the fight with Doomsday in the comics. That's how it plays out. It's a fucking punching match. Mm-hmm. They just punch each other, and I think Rocky II style, they both go down at the same time. Which, fuck, that's another thing. I made a joke about this to a friend, but it really rings true. The fight between Batman and Superman, which is what's advertised in the title of this movie, lasts about 10 to 13 minutes. Rocky movie fights go on a bit longer than that. Mm-hmm. And the movies aren't called Rocky versus Apollo, Rocky versus Ivan Drago, Rocky, they're about Rocky. They are Rocky movies, but the fucking fights go on longer than the goddamn fight in this movie, which is a part of the title.
Right.
It's mind-blowing. Like, just... This movie has been in development since about 2001, 2002-ish.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you count all of the various iterations of Superman, I mean, Superman just has had problems in development.
Yeah. And
I would honestly say maybe it's time you put Superman out to pasture.
I don't know if that's it, though. I think Superman needs to be given to somebody that can do something weird with it, because Superman is a weird property. The problem is they keep trying to make it marketable towards everyone. And that ultimately distills it down into this boring lump of generic-ass shit that we've seen before. Because that's the thing, though. It's like, it's possible to market Superman to a broader audience, but we did that shit back in the 70s with Chris Reeves. Like, those movies, that's what that shit needs to be. Otherwise, I would say, like, Superman's an alien, and the villains he fights are fucking weird. Like, Lex Luthor as a villain to an alien that can fly and use laser vision. Like, that's a weird pairing.
Also, why keep bringing Lex Luthor into it to begin with? Yes, he's Superman's arch nemesis, but there are plenty of big villains for him to fight. Brainiac has never been in a Superman movie. Mm-hmm. How many Superman movies are there? And there isn't. And
Seven.
And there hasn't been a single one that uses Brainiac.
Wait, no, let me think here. You got the first 4, Returns, 7. Yeah, I was right. It's 7.
Yeah. So, I mean, you would think by now they would have figured that out, but it's the same. Honestly, it's similar to like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. How long has it taken them to get to Krang?
They're finally doing it.
Well, we'll see. And that's the thing. I don't care enough about Turtles to.
Is that a segue?
That is a segue. We've been talking about Batman versus Superman for an hour, and I'm done at this point. I'm washed.
I'm fascinated by what a failure this movie is, but as a whole, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I hate it. I don't think I hate it, and obviously I don't love it. There's parts of it that are enjoyable. This is what everybody else has been saying. Any kind of like legitimate critical opinion that you can get on this film is like right on the money. There's good and there's bad. Most of it's bad.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
There's good times and bad times, but mostly bad.
So in 2012...
to quote Red Letter Media's Grabowski's series.
That's a funny theme song. 2012, they rebooted the Ninja Turtles on television. And it's not bad. I've heard, actually, there's a lot of people that love it. I'm mildly intrigued to like get into this because there's continuity to it. There's a lot of stuff that they pull from almost every incarnation of Turtles before it. For example, the Krang, there's not just one Krang in this. There's a race of Krangs. Mm. The leader of the new Krang race is voiced by Gilbert Gottfried, and he's in the crossover that I'm about to talk about. So Just because I know you're a Godfrey fan, that's worth noting because he's not bad. He does what he does. I'm sure they probably let him improvise a bit on this because it feels like more of his jokes are in his dialogue. But so they got the new CGI turtles, and they got the new crossover episode with the old 1987 turtles. I'm hearing a lot of feedback.
What's that?
I was hearing some feedback there.
Oh, okay. Is it coming from my side?
It could be. I'm not 100% sure.
I don't hear any noise at all. Are you still hearing it?
Hold on.
I don't hear a word you're saying, Bill. I do not hear a word that you're saying.
Are we back? I think we're back.
And we're back. We had some technical difficulties we were trying to suss out.
So there's a new Ninja Turtles cartoon on Nickelodeon.
Yeah, and tell us about it because I know nothing about it, so I'm listening with open ears.
It's very interesting how much they pull from other series and what they do with it. Because you saw Turtles Forever, right?
I did, yes.
Do you remember the Utron Shredder in Turtles Forever?
What?
Basically, okay, see, this is the thing. Even you don't even know. Okay, so the 2003 series of Ninja Turtles didn't just have Shredder. It had Utron Shredder, which was this little Krang alien that got in the Shredder suit. So it was basically a hybrid of Krang and Shredder together.
Oh, okay.
And then now the new Turtles series has the Krang as this alien race that's coming and trying to take over the universe. Maybe with the help of these dinosaur aliens, I don't know. But when the crossover episode starts, like aliens have taken over the Earth and the turtles are living on a spaceship out in space. And they just get pinned through some circumstances. They get sent into another dimension, which is the 2D 87 Turtles dimension. Stuck in
space eating freeze-dried pizza.
I don't think they reference pizza that much in this new series. Maybe they do. I haven't seen too much of it. That's the thing. With the new series, I'm not that familiar. I've seen some episodes here and there, and from what I hear about it, it's really interesting, and I'd like to get more into it. But at first, you get to see the new 3D Turtles in 2D, and then, our 87 Turtles show up, and they're in 2D, and it's great. The one thing about this, in addition to the fact that this has the original 4 voice actors doing the original Turtles, Pat Fraley comes back as Krang. And Pat Fraley as Krang is just hysterical. I don't know. You've heard him do Krang before.
Oh yeah.
Who is this? I don't think you should be looking over here. He's fantastic. I could listen to him do fucking Krang all day. But there's like a lot of dimension hopping. Like you get to see the 2D 87 Turtles come into 3D. And you get to see old school Krang come into 3D. And it turns out that if you remember from the old 2D cartoon, right? Krang just shows up and there's no explanation of how he showed up or how him and Shredder knew each other and the like. This crossover explains it by saying that the leader of the Krang race in the new series is cousins with old Krang and banished him to the 2-dimensional universe. I like that. That was a fun little nod. And I mean, other than that, it's just a lot of fun. The turtles are not portrayed as pussies that can't fight like they are in Turtles Forever, which I think because we have the original voice actors back doing them, it's even more appropriate. I can forgive Turtles Forever, especially because they probably a lot of their jokes that they're making are based on like where that series went over time. Because it didn't start out silly and goofy so much. It still had aspects of that, but it wasn't what it had become by season 8 or 9 or whatever.
I mean, I think the big problem a lot of people have with Turtles Forever is they didn't bring back like any of the original voice actors.
And that might have been some kind of union dispute from what I've read in the past, but everyone that's alive, with the exception of April, is here.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, and they might do a future crossover where they bring her in. So I don't know, but as this was, I enjoyed it. It's nothing. It's nothing great. It's not as long as Turtles Forever, which is probably a plus actually. Like it's quick, 21-minute episode. It runs by, and I think it gave the 87 series a lot more respect than Turtles Forever did.
Well, Turtles Forever definitely depicted the 87 series as more kiddish, and I would say to an extent that's pretty accurate, though.
It's true, but I really like what they did with it in this one, and the fact that the original voice actors really add to it, because they're not doing the voices ironically, like they're just picking up where they had left off 20 years ago. Like they're just right back in the roles. And they're both fun specials. They are both fun crossovers, but this one, Turtles Forever really glorifies the original Mirage comics, where it's like, oh, these are the real badasses. And there's a slight appearance. There's a cameo by the Mirage Comics original series in the new crossover, which is called Transdimensional Turtles. It's fine. They're not animated. They kind of move stop motion style through comic book panels that flash across the screen. And that was a really interesting, cool way to do it. Nothing groundbreaking, but I think there was a legitimate concern that like we don't want to copy what Turtles Forever did. So there was a definite effort here to be different, and okay. I appreciate it. I thought it was really good.
All right. So with that having been said, then that's a quick capsule review of was it Transdimensional Turtles?
Yep, that's the title.
All right. So, as far as other topics to discuss this evening, this is going to be a shorter episode for sure, but I do have a couple things I'd like to talk about. First of all is just segueing into this week's theme for my 365 movies list is, as I mentioned earlier, post-apocalyptic films. Now, I should say that a film that I watched last night, A Boy and His Dog. Have you heard of this one, Bill?
No. Was Zach talking about this at some point?
I don't know if Zach's talked about it. I don't know that I don't know whether or not he's seen it. Now, A Boy and His Dog is based on a Harlan Ellison story. Now, are you familiar with Harlan Ellison? Bill? Harlan Ellison, for those who don't know, is a author of mostly speculative science fiction. He's written stuff for Star Trek. He's written one of his more famous stories was what was the name of that Star Trek episode? Well, anyway,
Tale of Two Cities.
City on the Edge of Forever. That's right.
Okay.
One of the most famous Star Trek episodes of all time.
I think South Park literally named an episode the same thing.
Right. The City on the Edge of Forever was completely like Ellison disowned the Trek episode because it did rewrite his original script, but it is a fascinating story either way. If you've never seen the concept of City on the Edge of Forever is basically the Star Trek crew finds this time travel portal. And when they step through it, they find that they're in like pre-World War II America.
In the 20s.
Yeah, I actually think it's the 1930s when it happens.
Did you notice I called this episode A Tale of Two Cities, which is something totally fucking different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, City on the Edge of Forever, how it works is basically the concept, and this just gives you an example of Harlan Ellison's unique sense of irony, is Captain Kirk falls in love with a beautiful woman and discovers that this woman is scheduled by fate to die at a certain point. And if she doesn't die in this freak accident, then she will lead a peace movement that will keep America out of World War II, thus resulting in Hitler dominating Europe.
Oh my God!
And
the bigger question in terms of Star Trek is: does that affect the Federation becoming a thing?
Oh, of course, that would be a huge impact.
Yeah,
I mean, that's redirecting the course of history. And so what William Shatner as Captain Kirk has to do is allow this woman to die in order to allow the future to exist as he knows it. And it's a dark story. It really, what's funny about it is it really isn't a great like Star Trek episode. It's a great sci-fi story, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, needless to say, Harlan Ellison has a dark sense of humor, and A Boy and His Dog is huge. I mean, a huge example of that. So, A Boy and His Dog takes place in a post-apocalyptic future after a nuclear holocaust has wiped out most of the population, and what's left on Earth is, on the surface, is mostly desert and roving bands of rape gangs searching for women.
And Batman. And Superman.
And Batman and Superman. Yeah, no, when I say rape gangs, this movie is like, oh, this is a super rapey movie, unfortunately.
What's that Sid Haig rape movie? Red Letter Media covered it on Best of the Worst. Sid Haig.
Aftermath?
Aftermath. That's
okay.
a super rapey movie.
Well, okay, so in the future of A Boy and His Dog, basically, when the female population is almost non-existent on the surface, and so basically what happens is men have become animals, and they search out women and rape them, and basically rape them until they're dead. It's fucked up. So enter the main characters. Don Johnson, a young Don Johnson, 1975 Don Johnson. So we're talking years before Miami Vice.
Mm-hmm.
And his good old pal, Blood, his dog, who he talks to, psychic, like through minds. Most of the dialogue between him and his dog is not spoken, it's thought. And so it's like dubbed in later. And his dog is kind of an asshole who likes to kind of take control of things and mocks him a lot, and particularly mocks the fact that Don Johnson is obsessed with finding women. He himself is also a poon hound looking for sex and rape, because what happens is he and his dog happen upon a woman, and Don Johnson decides, I'm going to rape this woman. And right as he's attempting to, a bunch of other men start attacking, and so he has to defend himself. So he and the dog and actually the woman end up fighting off this group of crazy rapist men. And then, and this is why this movie is never going to be remade, and it's never going to be seen as a progressive movie in any way, shape, or form. After saving her from being killed and raped, she basically says, "Okay, well, maybe I'll have sex with you now." Don Johnson.
I thought it was going way darker than that. Okay.
Oh, Bill, I'm going to go ahead and spoil this movie for you. For those going forward, I'm going to say this is the end of the Pubcast for those of you who are not interested in having this movie spoiled. Because I know, Bill, you're probably not going to watch this movie unless I spoil it. And if I spoil it, you might actually want to see this movie. So anyway, it turns out that this woman that Don Johnson's character's name is Vic. So, and his dog is Blood. So Vic and Blood find this girl named Quilla, and Quilla basically tells him that she's from the underground. And in the underground is the city of Topeka, Kansas, which has survived the nuclear holocaust in this giant underground bomb shelter that, by the way, the Fallout series, the whole vault aspect of that, is kind of stolen from this movie. Mm-hmm. So there's this giant underground city of people. And she escapes and runs away, and Don Johnson decides to follow his Don Johnson and follows and leaves Blood on the surface and follows her underground. And so he goes, in pursuit of her, he goes into this underground territory, and you see, oh wow, well, the people of Topeka, Kansas are getting on pretty well. This is a pretty nice setup they have going here. And it's this typical utopian society kind of thing where things are clearly much more fucked up than they seem.
More than meets the eye.
In order to control their population, people guilty of minor crimes within within Topeka are taken before the committee, and they are judged. And if the judgment is often that they're to be sent to the farm, which means they're killed, basically. And so if you get judged if they judge you to go to the farm, that means you're dead. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Don Johnson is captured by the town council, who brings him before them, and they figure out, so we've got a problem. All these years living underground, most of our men are sterile. They can't knock up women. So Don Johnson, for a brief moment, thinks, oh, so you want me to do the job, do you now? And they do, but not in the way he hopes. We're talking more artificial insemination style. It turns out that what the people of Topeka have been doing for the last few years in order to keep their population up is they will kidnap fertile men they use their women to attract men underground in order to basically turn them into sperm machines in order to fertilize their population. And so Quilla banged Don Johnson because she knew that he was a fertile man, and that you're going to come down. I'm going to lure you down into our vaults, and you're going to become you're going to fertilize a bunch of our women, and then when we're done with you, we'll bring you to the farm. So anyway, this is how the movie goes from here, Bill. This is where it gets really weird. Mm-hmm. Don Johnson escapes, and Quilla escapes. Because she finds out that she herself was also being used by the town council and is also scheduled for death. So knowing that she's going to die, she goes from being a traitor who charmed Don Johnson into a certain death. She decides, okay, well, I'll go with you anyway because I love you, right? Mm-hmm. And then when Don Johnson and the girl get back to the surface, they find out that his poor dog Blood is suffering and dying from starvation. And what are we going to do? We have no food up here. We have to scrounge, and the poor dog's going to die. And Quilla gives a look to Don Johnson and says, we have to leave him here because if we're going to survive, we need to move on because we're both, we're both here. And Don Johnson looks at her, looks at the dog. Cut to morning. You see a campfire, and you see the campfire dying, and you hear Blood, and you hear Vic, Don Johnson, talking to each other, and you don't see Quilla anywhere. And then this is where the movie ends with one of the best ending lines just fucking ever. And so what happens is, so you see Vic and Blood talking to each other, and Blood's final words in the last line of the movie is, well, I'd say that she had marvelous judgment, Albert. if not particularly good taste.
The dog says this.
Yes, if not particularly good taste.
Wow.
So they ate her. This is a movie of hateful people. There is no one in this movie you could call a empathetic protagonist. Everyone in this movie is a scumbag in their own way, shape, or form.
Right.
And I kind of admire how incredibly low everyone in this movie gets. It's a satire of the darkest side of humanity. And it's a creative sci-fi movie. Considering the low budget, really fascinating. The movie was directed. It's the only film directed by an actor named L.Q. Jones.
Mm-hmm.
L.Q. Jones is one of those that guy character actors who has been in like a ton of movies. He was in movies from the 1950s up till like the 2000s. And he's one of those guys that you probably would recognize if you saw him, but I guarantee you that you've like, you know what? Here, let me find a picture of LQ. All right, I'm gonna share my screen in just a sec. All right, do you recognize this guy from anywhere, Bill? This actor?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Well, he's a that guy actor. It does. The one thing I will say is it does depend on like he's watched. I mean, you probably haven't watched movies that he's been in. Some of the movies he's been in. He was in a Marlon Brando movie, Men in War. He was in The Young Lions, another Brando movie, Western called Warlock. More getting into a more modern time. He was in the Clint Eastwood movie Hang 'Em High. He was with Jason Robards in The Ballad of Cable Hogue. He was in Mother Jugs and Speed, the Bill Cosby movie. Lightning Jack with Paul Hogan.
Heard of, never seen it.
Casino.
Heard of from you, Lightning Jack.
Yeah, he was in Casino. He was in Lone Wolf McQuade, the Chuck Norris movie.
Never heard of any of this shit.
Really? The Mask of Zorro?
I've heard of The Mask of Zorro. I think I've seen it.
Wait, the Antonio Banderas, The Mask of Zorro?
With Anthony Hopkins?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Okay.
The sequel's the one that's forgettable.
Yeah. L.Q. Jones is a Three-Fingered Jack, the weird, goofy guy who like dies a couple times without dying. Oh, you have to see it again if you haven't seen it in a while.
It's been ages. It's been like since high school.
He was also in The Edge, also with Anthony Hopkins, The Patriot.
Ugh. Oh, The Patriot.
Yeah. He's a that guy, is the point.
Who directed The Patriot? Was that a fucking Roland Emmerich?
If I'm not mistaken, The Patriot was directed by the same guy who did I think you're right, it was Roland Emmerich.
Oh God.
Yeah. This just got depressing because Roland Emmerich. First of all,
who saw Stonewall? I've heard it's amazing.
Have you?
Double Toasted keeps saying it's 2015's identical. I haven't seen it to me.
Roland. Well, this is the end of our
Rolling on an Emmerich.
Yeah, rolling down the river, Roland Emmerich. This sucks. All right, well, have a good night, everybody. This has been a depressing day.